My name is Haley Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. The day my father died was also the day I had to make the hardest choice of my life. When I asked my boss, who happens to be my sister-in-law Allison, for 3 days to bury my dad, she gave me an ultimatum: choose work or family. What she didn't expect was that I would choose both and walk away with the $39 million deal she tried to steal from me. Before I tell you how I turned my family's betrayal into my greatest triumph, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between work and family. Trust me, this story might change how you view those choices forever. I grew up as a daddy's girl in every sense of the word. My father, Samuel Mitchell, built Mitchell Enterprises from nothing but a small bed and breakfast in downtown Seattle. I still remember running through the hallways of that first location as a 5-year-old, helping Dad fold napkins for the dining room while he taught me about running a business. "Always remember, Haley," he would say, "how you treat people is more important than how much money you make." Those words became the foundation of not just our relationship, but my entire approach to life. By the time I was finishing high school, Mitchell Enterprises had expanded to 15 luxury boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest. My brother Jason, 4 years older than me, had already joined the company after completing his business degree. I followed in his footsteps, earning my MBA with a focus on hospitality management, determined to help continue my father's legacy. Our family dynamic was always warm but complicated. My mother Grace supported Dad's ambitions while maintaining the heart of our family. Jason was always more analytical and reserved, taking after our mother's practical nature. I inherited Dad's passion and people skills. We made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and weaknesses. That's why it came as such a shock when Dad appointed Allison, Jason's wife of only 3 years, as CEO of Mitchell Enterprises last year, while I was given the role of Director of Operations. The announcement came shortly after Dad's first heart attack, which had been a warning sign that forced him to consider succession planning more seriously. "Allison has an outsider's perspective," Dad explained to me privately after seeing my hurt expression. "Sometimes fresh eyes see opportunities the rest of us miss. And you, Haley, you're the heart of this operation. You understand our people, our customers, what makes Mitchell Enterprises special. I need you in operations because that's where our values live or die." I accepted his decision, though it stung. Allison had worked in corporate hospitality before marrying Jason, but she hadn't been with Mitchell Enterprises long enough to truly understand our company culture. Still, I trusted Dad's judgment and committed to making it work. For the first few months, things progressed smoothly enough. I handled the day-to-day operations of all 19 hotels we now owned, while Allison focused on expansion strategies and investor relations. Dad's health seemed to stabilize, and he remained chairman of the board, though he came to the office less frequently. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. Little decisions Allison made that prioritized short-term profits over staff well-being. The way she dismissed some of our longest-serving employees' concerns. How she began excluding me from key meetings while taking credit for operational improvements my team had implemented. The tension between us grew gradually, especially as I noticed her making unilateral decisions without consulting the board. New vendors replacing our long-standing partners, often with higher costs but questionable quality. Staff complaints about reduced benefits that never seemed to reach Dad's ears. When I raised concerns, Allison would smile tightly and say, "This is how modern businesses operate, Haley. Your father's approach was charming but outdated." Despite these challenges, I remained focused on maintaining the standards Dad had established. I traveled between properties, trained staff personally, and ensured that the Mitchell experience remained consistent across all locations. Dad noticed, calling me late one evening after reviewing our customer satisfaction reports. "You're keeping the spirit alive, Haley," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered, but filled with pride. "Don't let anyone change that. It's what makes us special." Meanwhile, I had been working for months on our biggest opportunity yet, a potential partnership with Nakamura International, a Japanese investment group interested in bringing the Mitchell brand to Asia. The deal would be worth $39 million in immediate capital, with projected revenues of over $100 million in the first 5 years. I had cultivated the relationship personally, spending countless hours on video calls, preparing detailed proposals, and even learning basic Japanese to show respect during negotiations. Allison initially showed little interest in the Nakamura deal, focusing instead on a potential merger with a larger hotel chain that would have essentially absorbed our brand. But as the Nakamura partnership gained momentum and the investors expressed enthusiastic interest, she suddenly took notice. 2 weeks before the final presentation, she began inserting herself into communications with the Nakamura team, reviewing my presentation materials and suggesting last-minute changes to our proposal. "I'll need to take the lead on this presentation," she informed me casually during a management meeting. "As CEO, it's important that I establish the primary relationship with partners of this magnitude." I pushed back as diplomatically as I could. "The Nakamura team has been working with me directly for 7 months. They specifically mentioned how much they appreciate our consistent communication. Changing the dynamic now might send the wrong message." Allison's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure they'll understand the CEO taking a more active role as we approach the finish line. It's standard practice." What wasn't standard practice was how she began reworking my carefully crafted proposal, shifting emphasis from our unique guest experience to aggressive expansion timelines that I knew we couldn't maintain without compromising quality. When I expressed concerns, she dismissed them as fear of growth. Dad's health took another turn for the worse during this time. He stopped coming to the office entirely, though he would call me occasionally to check in. I didn't burden him with my concerns about Allison, not wanting to add stress during his recovery. Instead, I focused on preparing for the Nakamura presentation, determined to ensure the partnership reflected our true values regardless of who delivered the final pitch. The evening before our internal review of the presentation, I stayed late at the office, refining financial projections and quality assurance frameworks that I hoped would balance Allison's aggressive growth targets. As I was about to leave, I overheard voices from the boardroom, Allison and Jason, who rarely stayed past 6. "Once this deal closes, we can move forward with the restructuring," Allison was saying. "The board will see the wisdom in consolidating operations once we have Nakamura's capital behind us." "What about Haley?" my brother asked. "She won't support cutting those properties loose." "Haley's emotional attachment to her father's first hotels is exactly why we need to make these decisions without her input," Allison replied. "Business isn't about sentiment. Those older properties are dragging down our profit margins." I froze in the darkened hallway, realizing they were discussing selling the original Mitchell properties, including the very first hotel my father had built with his own hands. These weren't just assets on a balance sheet. They were the foundation of everything we stood for. That night, I called Dad, but got no answer. I left a message saying I needed his advice on something important, then tried to sleep, my mind racing with what I'd overheard and how to address it. Little did I know that by morning, everything would change in ways I couldn't have imagined. The call came at 5:43 a.m. I was already awake, reviewing notes for the investor meeting scheduled for later that day, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. "Mom," I answered, immediately alert. She never called this early. Her voice broke on the other end. "Haley, it's your father. He's had another heart attack. The ambulance just left. Meet us at Seattle General." The world tilted on its axis. I don't remember getting dressed or driving to the hospital. The next clear memory I have is of the sterile waiting room, the 2 bright fluorescent lights, and my mother's face as the doctor approached us. I knew before he spoke. The gentle hand on my mother's shoulder, the practiced sympathy in his eyes. "We did everything we could," he said softly. "I'm very sorry for your loss." Mom collapsed into my arms, her body shaking with silent sobs. Samuel Mitchell, the man who had built an empire with kindness and integrity as his foundation, was gone at 64. Jason arrived 30 minutes later, his expression shocked but controlled. He hugged Mom briefly, then stepped back, already on his phone texting someone. I felt a flare of anger at his detachment, but grief overwhelmed everything else. I need to let Allison know, he said, stepping away to make a call. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, decisions, and tears. We were taken to say goodbye to Dad, his body peaceful, but unrecognizably still. Mom placed her wedding ring in his hand before they took him away, whispering private words of farewell that made my heart splinter into pieces. By mid-morning, Allison arrived at the hospital, dressed impeccably in a charcoal business suit. She hugged Mom and expressed appropriate condolences, but I noticed her checking her watch as we discussed immediate arrangements. Jason, the board will need to be notified immediately, she said during a lull in conversation. And, Haley, what about the Nakamura presentation? It's in 3 days. I stared at her in disbelief. The presentation? My father just died, Allison. She had the grace to look momentarily abashed. Of course, I'm just thinking practically. These investors have flown in from Tokyo specifically for this meeting. Postponing could jeopardize everything we've worked for. We'll figure it out, I said firmly. Right now, we need to plan Dad's funeral. The rest of the day was consumed with arrangements. Dad had left detailed instructions, thankfully, which made some decisions easier. The funeral would be held in 3 days at the chapel where he and Mom had married. He wanted to be cremated, with his ashes scattered at Mount Rainier, where he had proposed to Mom 40 years earlier. That evening, we gathered at my parents' home, the same house I had grown up in, despite Dad's success. Mom had always insisted on keeping their first home, another example of how they prioritized sentimental value over status. Neighbors and close friends brought food and condolences while we sat in a daze, occasionally sharing memories of Dad that made us laugh through tears. As people began to leave, I pulled Allison aside in the kitchen. About the Nakamura presentation, I said quietly. I need to be with my family these next few days. The funeral is the same day as the meeting. Allison leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I understand this is difficult timing, Haley, but you know how crucial this deal is. That's why I've prepared everything meticulously. You have all my notes, the complete presentation, financial projections, everything you need to handle it without me. She frowned slightly. The Nakamura team has been working with you directly. They're expecting you to lead the presentation. I'm sure they'll understand given the circumstances. My father just died, Allison. I'm asking for 3 days to bury him and support my mother. Surely the company can function without me for that long. Something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, not compassion. Let me think about how we can handle this. We'll talk tomorrow at the office. I was about to insist that I wouldn't be coming to the office the next day when Jason entered the kitchen. Mom's asking for you, Haley, he said. She wants to go through Dad's clothes for the funeral. As I left, I overheard Allison murmur to Jason, this might actually work in our favor. I paused in the hallway, straining to hear more. Not now, Jason whispered. We'll discuss it later. That night, after helping Mom sort through Dad's belongings, a task that left us both emotionally exhausted, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom. The glow-in-the-dark stars Dad had placed on my ceiling 25 years ago still emitted a faint green light. I stared at them, remembering how he had arranged them in actual constellations, turning my bedroom into a planetarium as he told me stories about Orion the Hunter and Cassiopeia the Queen. Always aim for the stars, Haley Comet, he'd said, using his special nickname for me. But remember, it's the journey that matters most. I fell asleep with tears drying on my face, completely unprepared for the battle that awaited me the next morning. I arrived at Mitchell Enterprises headquarters at 9:30 the next morning, having promised Mom I would return by noon to help with more funeral arrangements. The modern glass building in downtown Seattle had always filled me with pride, but today it felt cold and impersonal as I made my way to Allison's corner office. Her assistant, Brenda, gave me a sympathetic look. I'm so sorry about your father, Haley. He was a wonderful man. Thank you, I said, touched by her sincerity. Is Allison available? She's expecting you, Brenda replied, gesturing toward the closed door. Allison was seated behind her massive desk, my father's desk, I couldn't help but notice, reviewing documents when I entered. She looked up and gestured for me to sit. Haley, I've been considering our situation, she began without preamble. The timing is certainly unfortunate, but business doesn't stop for personal tragedy. The Nakamura meeting cannot be postponed. I understand that, I said. As I mentioned yesterday, you have everything you need to handle the presentation without me. I've spent 7 months preparing. That's precisely the issue, she interrupted. You've been the point person on this deal. For me to step in at the last minute would send a message of instability to the investors, especially given Samuel's passing. I took a deep breath. What exactly are you saying, Allison? She leaned forward, steepling her fingers. I'm saying you have a choice to make. Either you handle the investor meeting as planned, or you attend your father's funeral. I can't support both. The room seemed to tilt sideways. You can't be serious. You're giving me an ultimatum to either miss my own father's funeral or abandon the biggest deal in our company's history? I'm being practical, she replied coolly. The company needs to demonstrate continuity and strength during this transition. The Nakamura team needs to see that we're stable and committed. And you don't think they'd understand a daughter attending her father's funeral? I asked incredulously. In business, perception is reality. If you're not there, it suggests this deal isn't your top priority. If I have to step in without proper preparation, it could raise concerns about our internal organization. I stood up, anger rising through my grief. This is absurd. My father founded this company. He poured his life into it. And now you're telling me I can't even take 3 days to lay him to rest? Allison's expression hardened. If you choose to attend the funeral, I'll have no choice but to present to Nakamura myself. And I should warn you, Haley, that would necessarily involve some restructuring of the proposal to align with my vision for the company moving forward. The threat was thinly veiled. She would take credit for my work and alter the deal to support whatever plans she and Jason had been discussing. The original Mitchell properties, my father's legacy, would likely be the first casualties. I need to speak with Jason, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Jason understands what's at stake here, she replied with a slight smile. He agrees that the company must come first right now. Samuel would have wanted that. Don't you dare presume to know what my father would have wanted, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. The door opened then, and Jason entered. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. I heard raised voices, he said, glancing between us. Your wife just informed me that I need to choose between attending Dad's funeral and saving his company, I said directly. Please tell me you don't support this. Jason shifted uncomfortably. Haley, it's complicated. The timing is terrible, but this deal is worth sacrificing our basic humanity for. I cut in. Dad built this company on respect and integrity. He would never have forced anyone to make this choice, least of all his own daughter. Dad isn't here anymore, Jason said quietly. We have to make difficult decisions now. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. My own brother, siding with his wife over our father's memory. While reviewing the financials last night, Allison continued smoothly. I noticed some concerning patterns in our operational expenditures. Several of our older properties are underperforming significantly. Post-acquisition, we'll need to consider divesting those assets. And there it was, confirmation of what I'd overheard. She was planning to sell off the original Mitchell hotels, the foundation of everything we'd built. Those properties aren't just about profit margins, I argued. They're our heritage. They embody the values that made us successful in the first place. Sentiment doesn't pay dividends, Haley, Allison replied. The board will understand that difficult choices are necessary for growth. Does the board know you've been manipulating the maintenance budgets for those properties to make them appear less profitable? I asked, the realization suddenly dawning on me. I noticed the discrepancies, but assumed they were accounting errors. Allison's expression flickered momentarily before regaining its composure. I don't know what you're talking about. All budgetary decisions have been made with the company's best interests in mind. I'd like to see the complete financial records, I said. All of them, not just the summaries you've been providing to the board. That won't be necessary, she replied coldly. You should focus on deciding whether you'll be handling the Nakamura presentation or not. I need your answer by the end of the day. As I turned to leave, furious and heartbroken, the door opened again. Michael Bennett, our company's longtime legal counsel and my father's close friend, stood in the doorway. From his expression, I could tell he had overheard at least part of our conversation. Haley, he said gently. I came as soon as I heard about Samuel. I'm so sorry. I nodded, fighting back tears. Thank you, Michael. Allison, Jason, he acknowledged with noticeably less warmth. I'll need to speak with you both about the succession protocols Samuel put in place. But first, if you don't mind, I'd like a moment with Haley. In the privacy of my own office, I finally broke down. Between sobs, I explained the impossible choice Allison had presented me with. Michael listened intently, his kind face growing increasingly troubled. That's not just unethical, Haley. It potentially violates several company bylaws that Samuel established. What should I do? I asked desperately. I can't miss Dad's funeral, but I can't let Allison destroy everything he built either. Michael placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Samuel once told me that you were the only one who truly understood the heart of Mitchell Enterprises. I think it's time we review some documents he left in my care. But first, go home to your mother. Take the rest of the day. We'll meet later. As I gathered my things to leave, my computer chimed with an email notification. It was from Allison to the entire executive team. In light of recent events, I will be personally handling the Nakamura presentation. Haley will be taking bereavement leave effective immediately. Please direct all operational queries to my office until further notice. She had made my decision for me, or so she thought. What she didn't realize was that she had also just declared war. I spent the afternoon with my mother, sorting through old photographs for the funeral service. Each image of my father, young and ambitious with his first hotel, proudly cutting ribbons at new locations, beaming at family holidays, was both a comfort and a fresh wound. Mom moved through the task with quiet dignity, occasionally pausing to share a memory or wipe away tears. He was so proud of you, Haley, she said, holding a picture of Dad and me at my MBA graduation. He always said you were the one who truly understood what Mitchell Enterprises was meant to be. I'm trying to hold on to that, Mom, I replied, my voice catching. But Allison is making it nearly impossible. I hadn't wanted to burden her with company politics, but the weight of the situation was crushing me. Haltingly, I explained the ultimatum and what I feared would happen to Dad's legacy. To my surprise, Mom's expression grew resolute rather than distressed. Your father faced similar challenges when he was building the company. People who saw dollar signs instead of dreams, who wanted to cut corners he refused to cut. She rose and went to her bedroom, returning with a small leather journal. He kept this from the very beginning. His business diary. He'd want you to have it now. As I flipped through the pages of my father's neat handwriting, one entry from 15 years ago caught my eye. Turned down merger offer today. Would have tripled our value on paper, but at what cost? Some will call it foolish, but I'm building something to last, not to sell. Integrity is a negotiable. Sometimes the hardest choice and the right choice are the same thing. His words resonated deeply, clarifying what I needed to do. Dad wouldn't want me to abandon his funeral for a business meeting, but he also wouldn't want me to abandon his life's work to people who didn't share his values. I need to fight for his legacy, Mom, I said finally. Not just attend his funeral. She squeezed my hand. He would expect nothing less. Do what needs to be done, Haley. I'll support whatever you decide. After dinner, I met Michael at a small cafe away from the office. He arrived carrying a thick folder and a concerned expression. I've been reviewing the financial records, he said once we were seated in a private corner. Your suspicions were correct. Allison has been systematically undermining the profitability of the original properties through creative accounting. Necessary maintenance deferred, quality improvement initiatives canceled, marketing budget slashed, all while the newer properties received preferential treatment. She wants to make them look like liabilities to justify selling them after the Nakamura deal, I concluded.
Exactly.
But there's more. Michael pulled out several documents. Your father amended his will and certain company bylaws 3 months ago, after his second health scare. He never filed these changes officially because he recovered and wanted to handle the transition personally. He pushed a document toward me. This is a special provision regarding succession planning. Samuel stipulated that in the event of his death, controlling interest in the company would pass to whichever of his children demonstrated the strongest commitment to the company's founding principles. I read through the legal language, my heart pounding. So the board would have to evaluate Jason and me based on our actions? Yes, with a special emphasis on decisions made during crisis periods. Samuel believed character is revealed under pressure. Michael smiled slightly. Your father was wiser than most gave him credit for. But how does this help us now? The board doesn't even know about these amendments. They will if I file them tomorrow morning, which I'm legally obligated to do now that Samuel has passed. Michael leaned forward. Haley, I think there's a way for you to attend your father's funeral and save his company, but it will require careful planning and perfect timing. For the next 3 hours, we developed a strategy. Michael would file the amended documents first thing in the morning. Meanwhile, I would gather evidence of financial manipulation and prepare a modified version of the Nakamura presentation, one that honored my father's vision while addressing legitimate growth concerns. There's one more thing, Michael said as we concluded. I've been in touch with several board members who are close to your father. They're concerned about the direction Allison has been taking and would support an emergency review of leadership. You think we could remove her as CEO? With sufficient evidence and a compelling alternative vision?
Yes.
But you'll need to be willing to step up, Haley. The board won't act unless there's a clear successor ready. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. I had never aspired to be CEO, content to work alongside my father in operations. But circumstances had changed. Someone needed to protect what Dad had built, and it was clear that someone had to be me. Back at home, I spent most of the night reviewing the financial records Michael had provided, documenting discrepancies, and refining my presentation. I also reached out to several loyal employees who had expressed concerns about recent management decisions, asking for their perspective and support. By dawn, I had the outlines of a plan. I would attend my father's funeral in the morning, deliver my eulogy, and then make it to the Nakamura meeting in the afternoon. It would be tight, but possible. More importantly, I would be prepared to confront Allison with evidence of her mismanagement and present an alternative path forward. One that honored Dad's legacy while embracing necessary growth. As the sun rose, I stood at my window, watching light spread across the Seattle skyline. Among the gleaming towers, I could just make out the original Mitchell Hotel, its classic facade a reminder of where we'd started. I won't let you down, Dad, I whispered. Some things are worth fighting for. The morning of the funeral dawned clear and crisp, one of those rare Seattle days when the sky is perfectly blue and Mount Rainier stands sentinel in the distance. It seemed fitting somehow, as if the weather itself was paying tribute to my father. I woke before my alarm, having slept only a few restless hours. In the pre-dawn stillness, I drove to the funeral home where Dad's body was being prepared for the service. I had arranged with the director for a private moment to say goodbye. The viewing room was peaceful, with soft lighting and the scent of lilies, Dad's favorite flower. He looked like himself, just sleeping, in the custom-made suit he had worn to my MBA graduation. I sat beside him, alone with my thoughts and memories. I wish you were here to tell me I'm doing the right thing, I whispered, taking his hand one last time. It was cool and still, so unlike the warm, firm grip I remembered.
I'm scared, Dad.
But I'm trying to be brave, like you taught me. I placed a small object in his jacket pocket, a polished stone from Mount Rainier that he had given me as a child. You always said to keep your eyes on the mountaintop but your feet on the ground, I continued. I'm trying to do both today. After a few more minutes of quiet reflection, I kissed his forehead and left, my resolve strengthened by this final moment together. The chapel filled quickly for the 10 a.m. service. Nearly 300 people attended, employees, business associates, friends, and family. My mother sat in the front row, dignified in her grief, supported by her sister, who had flown in from Chicago. Jason sat beside her, with Allison next to him in an appropriately somber black dress. She looked surprised to see me arrive in time for the service. When it came time for the eulogy, I approached the podium with steady steps. Looking out at the sea of faces, many tearful, all attentive, I felt a surge of strength. These people had known and respected my father. They would understand what I was fighting for. Samuel Mitchell was more than my father. I began. He was a visionary who believed business could be both successful and humane. He taught me that profit without purpose is meaningless and that how we treat people is more important than the bottom line. I spoke for 15 minutes, sharing stories of Dad's generosity, his unwavering integrity, and his dedication to creating spaces where people felt valued. I didn't glance at Allison once, but I could feel her gaze on me throughout. My father built Mitchell Enterprises one relationship at a time, I concluded. He understood that true luxury isn't about marble floors or expensive fixtures. It's about making people feel seen, respected, and cared for. That legacy doesn't end today. It lives on in everyone who embraces his vision of compassionate commerce. As I returned to my seat, the chapel filled with applause, an unusual response at a funeral, but somehow appropriate for a man who had touched so many lives. My mother squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face, but pride shining in her eyes. After the service, while others proceeded to the cemetery for the interment, I quietly slipped away. I had already said my private goodbye, and there was another battle waiting. I changed quickly in my car from funeral attire to business, and headed downtown to Mitchell Enterprises headquarters. The Nakamura meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in our main conference room. I arrived at 1:30, giving myself time to center my thoughts and review my materials one last time. Michael met me in the lobby, his expression both concerned and encouraging. Allison has been in there for an hour already, setting up, he informed me. She doesn't know you're coming.
Good.
Let's keep it that way until the last moment. I checked my watch. Are the board members in place? 3 have arrived already, including the chairman. The others are on their way. They're intrigued by your request for their attendance. And the financial documentation? Distributed to each board member's tablet, with key discrepancies highlighted. They'll have time to review it before you make your case. We rode the elevator in silence, both aware of the stakes. As we approached the conference room, I could hear Allison's voice through the partially open door. Unfortunate circumstances preventing Haley from joining us today, she was saying smoothly. Family matters, as I'm sure you understand. But I assure you, Nakamura International remains our highest priority. I took a deep breath and entered the room, Michael at my side. The scene froze momentarily, Allison mid-gesture at the head of the table, the 4 Japanese executives turning to see who had interrupted, several board members looking up in surprise from their tablets. My apologies for the dramatic entrance, I said calmly, directing my words to Mr. Nakamura himself. But I couldn't miss this opportunity to honor both my father and the partnership we've been developing together. Allison recovered quickly, though her smile had hardened. Haley, what a surprise. We understood you would be at the funeral today. I delivered my father's eulogy this morning, I replied, moving toward the table. He taught me that commitments matter, which is why I'm here now. Mr. Nakamura stood and bowed slightly. Ms. Mitchell, please accept our sincere condolences for your loss. Your dedication is most impressive under these circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Nakamura. My father would have wanted me here. I turned to address the room. If you'll allow me, I'd like to present our proposal as originally developed with a few important updates. Allison stepped forward. I've already begun the presentation. Perhaps you could join me in supporting. Actually, I interrupted firmly. I believe the board would prefer to hear the complete vision, including some elements that may have been overlooked in your preliminary remarks. I nodded toward the chairman, Lawrence Keller, who had been my father's friend for 20 years. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Given the circumstances and Ms. Mitchell's unique position as both family member and operational director, I think we should hear her complete presentation, he said. Allison, please take a seat. For the next 45 minutes, I walked through the comprehensive partnership plan I had developed with the Nakamura team. I emphasized the balance between expansion and maintaining our core values, outlined quality control measures that would ensure consistency across markets, and presented financial projections that showed sustainable growth without sacrificing our identity. Throughout my presentation, I could see the Japanese executives nodding approvingly. They had been working with me for months and recognized the vision we had crafted together. More importantly, I could see the board members making connections between my presentation and the financial discrepancies they had been reviewing. When I reached the section about our legacy properties, I paused deliberately. Mitchell Enterprises began with a single hotel that embodied my father's vision of personalized luxury, I said, displaying images of our original Seattle property. Some might see these established locations as less profitable than newer acquisitions, but they remain the heart of our brand identity. I clicked to the next slide, which compared the actual maintenance costs for these properties against the inflated figures in Allison's reports. When properly managed, these locations continue to outperform industry averages and provide valuable training grounds for our staff. They are not liabilities to be discarded, but assets to be celebrated. Allison shifted uncomfortably in her seat as several board members exchanged meaningful glances. As I concluded, Mr. Nakamura spoke up. Ms. Mitchell, your presentation aligns perfectly with what attracted us to your company in the first place. We seek partners who balance profit with purpose, tradition with innovation. He turned to his colleagues, who nodded in agreement before he continued. We would be honored to move forward with this partnership, under your direction as outlined today. Under her direction? Allison interjected, unable to contain herself. I should clarify that as CEO, I will be overseeing the implementation of any agreement we reach. Mr. Nakamura looked at her coolly. With respect, Mrs. Mitchell, our interest is specifically in the vision and operational approach Ms. Haley Mitchell has developed. If management structures are in flux, we would need reassurances before proceeding. The chairman cleared his throat. I believe this might be an appropriate moment to address some governance questions that have arisen. Mr. Bennett, you mentioned having important documents requiring board attention? Michael stepped forward, distributing copies of my father's amended succession plan. Samuel Mitchell made specific provisions regarding leadership transition, which I've now officially filed with the company records. The board may wish to review these before making any further decisions. As the board members read through the documents, Jason finally spoke up. What exactly is happening here, Haley? This feels like a coup. Not a coup, Jason. A correction. I met his gaze directly. Dad built something special, something worth protecting. I'm just following through on his wishes. The next hour unfolded in a blur of questions, clarifications, and increasingly uncomfortable revelations as the board examined the financial discrepancies Michael and I had uncovered. Mr. Nakamura and his team were excused to a separate conference room while the board deliberated, with promises to reconvene once internal matters were settled. By 4:30 p.m., the direction of the wind had unmistakably shifted. The chairman called for an emergency vote on leadership, citing the succession provisions and the evidence of financial misrepresentation. The result was decisive. Allison would be removed as CEO, effective immediately. As the meeting concluded, Allison finally lost her composure. "This is a mistake you'll all regret," she snapped, gathering her things. "Jason, are you coming?" My brother looked torn, glancing between his wife and me. For a moment, I saw the brother I had grown up with. Thoughtful, kind, but easily influenced by stronger personalities. "I need to talk to Haley first," he said finally. "I'll meet you at home." With a final glare, Allison stormed out, leaving behind a roomful of people both exhausted and resolved. Mr. Nakamura approached me as the board members dispersed. "We would still very much like to proceed with our partnership, Ms. Mitchell. Perhaps we could reconvene tomorrow to finalize details." "I would be honored," I replied, shaking his hand. "And please call me Haley." As the Nakamura team departed, I found myself alone with Jason and Michael. The emotional and physical toll of the day suddenly hit me, and I sank into a chair, completely drained. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" Jason asked, his voice more wondering than accusatory. "I planned to protect Dad's legacy," I corrected gently. "I didn't want it to happen this way." He nodded slowly. "I should have seen what she was doing. I should have stood up for you, for Dad." "It's not too late to do the right thing," I told him. "We're still family, Jason. That hasn't changed." As the sun set over Seattle, casting long shadows through the conference room windows, I thought about the day's journey, from saying goodbye to my father to fighting for his dream. There would be more battles ahead, more difficult decisions to make. But for now, at least, I had honored both my father's memory and his vision. The $39 million deal was secure, but more importantly, so was the soul of Mitchell Enterprises. The next morning dawned with a mixture of grief and determination. I had spent a restless night processing everything that had happened, interrupted by periodic calls from board members seeking reassurance about the company's direction. By the time I arrived at the office, word of Allison's removal had spread throughout the company, creating an atmosphere of nervous anticipation. I was reviewing notes for my meeting with the Nakamura team when Jason appeared in my doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his usually immaculate appearance rumpled and tired. "Can we talk?" he asked hesitantly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I was hoping we would." He sat down heavily, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Allison is threatening to sue the company for wrongful termination. She says she has evidence that you manipulated financial data to make her look bad." I had expected as much. That would be quite a challenge, considering the original financial records clearly show what happened. "Is that what you believe, Jason?" He looked down at his hands.
No.
"After the meeting yesterday, I went through some of the documents myself. She's been lying to me too, making me think Dad's original properties were failing when they weren't." "Why do you think she did that?" "She has investors, friends from her previous company. They've been looking to acquire boutique hotel properties in prime urban locations. Our original hotels would be perfect targets." He looked up, shame evident in his expression. "I didn't know the extent of it, Haley, I swear. I thought she was just being pragmatic about underperforming assets." "But you went along with it," I said quietly. "You supported her when she tried to force me to miss Dad's funeral." I was wrong. The simple admission seemed to cost him greatly. "After you left yesterday, I called Mom. We talked for hours. She helped me see how far I'd strayed from what Dad taught us." A knock at the door interrupted us. Michael entered, carrying a thick folder. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing. Allison is in the lobby with 2 attorneys, demanding to speak with the board." "Let's not keep her waiting then," I replied, standing up. "Jason, are you with us or with her?" He stood as well, straightening his shoulders. "With the company, with the family, where I should have been all along." The 3 of us made our way to the main conference room, where the board had hastily assembled. Allison and her lawyers were already seated, her expression a mixture of fury and confidence. "This witch hunt is completely unacceptable," she began as soon as I entered. "The board has acted illegally on manipulated evidence and hearsay. I demand immediate reinstatement and a formal apology." Lawrence Keller, the board chairman, responded calmly. "Mrs. Mitchell, the board acted in accordance with company bylaws and on the basis of well-documented financial discrepancies. We're prepared to defend our decision in court if necessary." "It won't be necessary," I interjected, taking a seat directly across from Allison. "Because we have something Allison might want to hear first." I nodded to Michael, who played an audio recording. A conversation between Allison and a potential investor discussing the planned disposal of our legacy properties once the Nakamura deal was secured. I had recorded it accidentally on my phone during a meeting several weeks earlier and had only discovered it while reviewing evidence. Allison's face paled as her own voice filled the room. "Once we secure the Nakamura capital, we'll move quickly to offload the original properties. Mitchell's daughter is emotionally attached to them, but she'll be easily managed. Her brother supports my vision completely. When the recording ended, the room fell silent. Allison's lawyers exchanged concerned glances. That's taken out of context, Allison protested, but her voice lacked conviction. We have more, I said simply, including documentation of your systematic undermining of those properties to make them appear less profitable. The board has reviewed it all. One of her lawyers leaned over to whisper something in her ear. She shook her head vehemently, but he persisted. There's something else you should know, Michael added, opening his folder. Samuel Mitchell's will contain a special provision that we've now officially filed with the company records. He read aloud. In the event of my death, controlling interest in Mitchell Enterprises shall pass to whichever of my children demonstrates the strongest commitment to the company's founding principles during times of crisis or transition. This determination shall be made by the board of directors based on actions taken to protect both the financial interests and core values of the company. The board voted unanimously this morning, Lawrence stated. Based on actions taken yesterday and evidence presented regarding financial management, Haley Mitchell will assume controlling interest in the company, effective immediately. Allison laughed incredulously. This is absurd. Samuel appointed me CEO because he knew Jason and I were better suited to modern business realities than his sentimental daughter. Dad appointed you CEO because he believed you would balance growth with values, I corrected. He trusted you to honor what made Mitchell Enterprises special while bringing fresh perspectives. Instead, you saw his legacy as something to be dismantled for profit. Business isn't a charity, Haley. Samuel was a good man, but an outdated businessman. These emotional attachments to old properties are exactly why companies fail to evolve. Actually, interjected Thomas Reed, our CFO who had remained silent until now, when managed properly, the original Mitchell properties outperform industry averages by 17%. Their customer loyalty metrics are unmatched in the sector. That's not sentiment, it's sound business. He slid a document across the table. These are the actual performance figures from the past 3 years, without the creative accounting applied in recent months. Allison's lawyers examined the document, their expressions growing increasingly grave. After a whispered consultation, the senior attorney addressed the board. My client would like to propose a mutual separation agreement. In exchange for a standard severance package and a non-disparagement clause, Mrs. Mitchell will step down voluntarily and waive any claims against the company. It was a surprisingly quick capitulation, suggesting they recognized the weakness of their position. The board members looked to me for direction. I have a counter-proposal, I said, meeting Allison's gaze. No severance package, but we won't pursue legal action regarding the financial manipulations if she signs a comprehensive non-compete agreement and returns any confidential company information in her possession. After another whispered conference, the attorney nodded. We'll need to review the specific terms, but my client is amenable to that framework. As the lawyers began discussing details with Michael and the board, I turned to Jason, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. What about you, Jason? Where do you stand now? He looked at his wife, then back to me. I want to stay with the company, if you'll have me. I know I've made mistakes, but this is my heritage too. Allison's expression hardened. You're choosing them over me? After everything we've built together. We built it on a foundation of lies, Allison. I can't be part of that anymore. He turned back to me. I understand if you can't trust me in a leadership role, but I want to earn back my place here. It was a moment of truth, not just for the company, but for our family. Dad would have wanted reconciliation if possible, but he also believed in accountability. You can stay, I decided. But not as an executive, at least not immediately. You'll need to work your way back up, starting with managing one of the original properties. Learn the business from the ground up, the way Dad did, the way I did. Rather than protest, Jason nodded. That's fair. Thank you, Haley. As the meeting concluded and people began to disperse, Allison approached me one last time, her lawyers hovering protectively nearby. You think you've won, she said quietly. But running this company isn't as easy as you believe. You'll face hard choices every day, decisions that can't always align with your precious values. I know, I replied simply. But that's the difference between us, Allison. I don't see maintaining our values as a burden. It's our greatest strength. She laughed softly. We'll see how long that idealism lasts in today's market. Goodbye, Haley. As she walked away, I felt no triumph, only a profound sense of responsibility. The battle had been won, but the real work was just beginning. Later that afternoon, with the legal matters temporarily settled, I met with the Nakamura team to finalize our partnership agreement. Mr. Nakamura seemed pleased by the leadership transition, particularly when I explained how it would ensure consistency with the vision we had developed together. Your father would be proud, he told me as we signed the final documents. Not just of securing this partnership, but of how you fought for the soul of his company. The $39 million deal was now officially complete, with an additional $11 million investment option included for the following year. But the true victory wasn't financial. It was knowing that Mitchell Enterprises would continue to embody the values my father had lived by. As the day drew to a close, I found myself alone in my father's old office, my office now. I sat in his chair, running my hands over the worn leather armrests, feeling both his absence and his presence simultaneously. I hope I did right, Dad, I whispered. I hope I made you proud. There was no answer, of course, but as I looked out over the Seattle skyline, the lights of the original Mitchell Hotel glowing warmly in the gathering dusk, I felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but I wouldn't be walking it alone. I had my father's legacy to guide me, a dedicated team behind me, and most importantly, the clarity of purpose that comes from knowing exactly what you're fighting for. 6 months after that fateful week, I stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the original Mitchell Hotel, surrounded by employees, partners, and friends. The occasion was the official launch of the Samuel Mitchell Foundation, created to support hospitality education and ethical business practices in the communities we served. When my father opened this hotel 35 years ago, I began, looking out at the assembled faces. He didn't just create a place for travelers to stay. He created a philosophy that luxury isn't just about thread counts and amenities, but about how you make people feel valued and respected. The months since my confrontation with Allison had been transformative for both the company and for me personally. The partnership with Nakamura International had exceeded all expectations, expanding to $50 million with the addition of 3 new Asian locations scheduled to break ground the following spring. More importantly, we had implemented the deal with an unwavering commitment to our core values, ensuring that each new property would embody the Mitchell spirit while respecting local cultures and traditions. Today, Mitchell Enterprises is stronger than ever. I continued, not despite our commitment to my father's principles, but because of them. Our revenue is up 22%, employee satisfaction has reached record levels, and customer loyalty metrics outperform the industry in every category. I didn't mention Allison, who had moved to Chicago to work with one of her investor friends. The legal separation had been finalized without further drama, though occasional rumors reached us of her criticizing our outdated business model to industry colleagues. The results spoke for themselves, however, and few paid attention to such complaints. Jason sat in the front row beside our mother, who had found new purpose as the honorary chairperson of the foundation. The past months had been difficult for him: divorce proceedings, the humbling experience of working as a hotel manager after years in the executive suite, and the slow process of rebuilding trust with both family and colleagues. To his credit, he had embraced the journey with genuine humility. Starting at our Portland location, he had worked diligently to learn every aspect of hotel operations from the ground up. His quarterly reviews showed consistent improvement, and staff had begun to respond positively to his more authentic leadership style. We were not yet back to the easy sibling relationship of our childhood, but we were making progress. The Samuel Mitchell Foundation will extend my father's legacy beyond our hotels, I explained to the audience. Through scholarships, mentorship programs, and community partnerships, we will foster the next generation of hospitality leaders who understand that ethical business is good business. I announced the Foundation's first initiative, a full scholarship program for employees' children pursuing higher education, regardless of whether they intended to join the hospitality industry. It was something Dad had always wanted to implement but had never found the right time to launch. After the formal presentation, as guests mingled and celebrated, Michael Bennett approached me with a glass of champagne. "Samuel would be bursting with pride if he could see this," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "You've not only preserved his legacy, you've expanded it." "Some days I still feel like I'm just trying to figure it all out," I admitted. "Making decisions I think he would approve of." "That's exactly why you're the right person for this role," Michael replied. "The moment you stop questioning whether you're honoring his values is the moment you might start to lose your way." Later that evening, I found myself sharing a quiet moment with Mom in Dad's old office, which I had preserved largely as he left it. She ran her hand along the bookshelf, smiling at the family photos interspersed among business texts and travel mementos. "You know what your father would say about all this?" she asked. "What's that?" "He'd say you're doing too much looking backward when you should be looking forward." Her eyes twinkled. "He never wanted to be remembered through unchanged traditions, Haley. He wanted to be remembered through evolving values." Her words struck a chord. In my determination to protect Dad's legacy, I had perhaps been too conservative in some areas. Innovation had always been part of his approach, after all. He embraced change that aligned with his values rather than fearing it. "You're right," I acknowledged. "It's time to start thinking about what Mitchell Enterprises can become, not just what it has been." The next morning, I called an executive meeting to discuss a new strategic initiative, identifying innovative ways to enhance guest experiences while maintaining our commitment to personalized service. I encouraged creative thinking, challenging assumptions about what luxury hospitality could mean in the coming decade. As the team engaged enthusiastically with the exercise, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was how Dad would have wanted me to lead, honoring the past while boldly imagining the future. Over the following weeks, I implemented several changes to my leadership approach. Rather than making decisions alone based on what I thought Dad would do, I created more collaborative processes that drew on diverse perspectives while filtering options through our core values. I established a quarterly innovation forum where employees at all levels could present ideas directly to the executive team. I also made peace with the fact that I would sometimes make mistakes, decisions Dad might have handled differently. What mattered was learning from those mistakes and staying true to the underlying principles that had guided him. Perhaps the most meaningful development came 3 months after the foundation launch, when Jason earned a promotion to regional manager based on his performance metrics and positive staff evaluations. When I delivered the news personally, he seemed genuinely moved. "I don't deserve this yet," he said frankly. "The numbers and your team say otherwise," I replied. "You've put in the work, Jason." Dad always believed in second chances when people showed genuine change. "I still have a lot to make up for," he acknowledged. "But thank you for giving me the opportunity to try." Our relationship continued to heal gradually, built on a new foundation of honesty and shared purpose rather than the competitive dynamic Allison had encouraged. We would never fully return to our childhood closeness, but perhaps we were building something more mature and meaningful in its place. On the anniversary of Dad's passing, I visited his favorite spot on Mount Rainier, where we had scattered his ashes. Standing in the crisp mountain air, looking out over the spectacular vista, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the lessons he had taught me, not just about business, but about life. "The hardest choice and the right choice are often the same thing," I whispered, echoing his journal entry that had guided me through that critical moment a year earlier. In choosing to fight for both my father's funeral and his company, I had discovered my own strength and purpose. The $39 million deal that Allison had tried to use as leverage had become just one milestone in a much more meaningful journey. As I made my way back down the mountain trail, I received a text from Mr. Nakamura with photos of our newest hotel opening in Kyoto. The images showed a beautiful blend of traditional Japanese aesthetics with the warmth and attentiveness that defined the Mitchell brand. The caption read simply, "Your father's vision knows no borders." That evening, I recorded a message for our company-wide communication channel, something I did regularly to maintain connection with our growing team. A year ago, I faced what seemed like an impossible choice between honoring my father's memory and saving his company, I said candidly. What I learned through that experience is that false dichotomies often mask deeper truths. The real question wasn't which to choose, but how to honor both. I paused, collecting my thoughts before continuing. Each of you faces choices every day between efficiency and care, between protocol and personalization, between what's easy and what's right. My father built this company on the belief that these shouldn't be either slash or propositions, but both slash and opportunities. That's the true Mitchell legacy, and it belongs to all of us now. As I ended the recording, I felt a sense of completion. The grief of losing Dad would never fully disappear, but it had transformed into something constructive, a commitment to carrying forward not just his business, but his values. The journey ahead would bring new challenges, opportunities, and difficult choices. But I faced them now with confidence, knowing that I had found my own voice while honoring his. In choosing both family and business that fateful day, I hadn't just saved a $39 million deal. I had discovered what truly mattered. I hope this story has meant something to you today. If you've ever faced an impossible choice or had to stand up for what you believe in, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others find their own courage. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of people navigating life's difficult decisions together. Remember, the hardest choices often lead to our greatest growth. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep choosing what matters most.